Some of them that are people that are in Canada currently, most especially, or people that have family members that are coming to join them very soon. So I'll do a brief introduction, and then I'm breaking that down into like the study permit changes, the work permit changes, permanent residence changes, and then we can take some questions after that. So a little bit of introduction. Why are we seeing some of those changes right now? Things are a bit different from when I came in 2015, about 9 years ago. But one of the noticeable changes is that the population of like newcomers, immigrants, both temporary and permanent residents, has grown tremendously over the last few years. Of utmost concern to the government right now is the population of temporary residents in Canada. So international students, visitors visa holders, work permit holders, and the like. As of 2015, it was just about 500,000 individuals temporary residents in Canada. But right now, we have more than 3 million temporary residents in Canada. And we're seeing the impact of that on things like housing, healthcare. A lot of those issues have always been there, but they are much more pronounced right now. So we've witnessed growth over the years. Number of temporary foreign workers has increased from 437,000 in 2019 to 1.2 million in 2023. More than 900,000 international students as of 2023. Work permit holders rose from 259,000 in 2015 to 949,000 in 2023. And then the number of study permits issued rose from 219,000 in 2015 to about 682,000 in 2023. So the government is kind of like shifting focus right now, and the new focus is to retain temporary workers with in-demand skills. So I'm going to come back to that later on, but right now the focus is more on like the sectors of the economy where there are like pronounced labor shortages, and that's part of the things that is driving the changes right now, and also kind of like safeguarding job opportunities for Canadians and existing permanent residents as well. So what are the changes we've seen, especially in recent times, and the ones that would probably affect a lot of people here? Number one is the cap introduced to study permit applications and the number of international students that Canada plans to welcome every year. The cap was introduced in January 2024. About a month ago, when the Honorable Minister of Immigration made some announcements, he emphasized the fact that the cap has come to stay. And then we're going to be witnessing further reduction in 2025 as well. So in total, 437,000 study permits will be issued in 2025. Also, part of the changes introduced earlier this year did not include was the provincial attestation letter, which means the number of international students that will be going to each provinces will now be accounted for through a quota. But at that time, that did not include students that were coming for masters and PhDs. So from 2025, that will also include those individuals. They also need to now get the provincial attestation letter. And over the next 3 years, IRCC expects that these changes will lead to approximately 300,000 fewer study permit holders in Canada. But right now, that does not apply to people already inside the country as international students that will be doing study permit extension. So right now, if you're extending your study permit, you don't need to get a provincial attestation letter. Maybe you're going for a second program for people who have done maybe a 1-year program and want to do another 1-year program. You don't need a provincial attestation letter right now. One of the changes that IRCC has also announced earlier in the year is that they are planning to make permanent changes to the number of hours that international students can work off campus when the school is in session. The minister announced 24 hours. It was announced it's going to start this fall, but we are just entering fall right now. There's no implementation date right now. So for a lot of international students hearing me today, take note of that. They've not implemented that, so you are still limited to 20 hours of work off campus when the school is in session right now until we have the implementation date for that. But you can work full-time when the school is on scheduled break as well. So for work permit changes, the biggest one right now is that for individuals applying for their postgraduate work permit from November 1, you now have to write the language test. If you've graduated, you're submitting your application for your postgraduate work permit before November 1, you don't need to write a language test. But from November 1, all individuals applying for postgraduate work permit now need to write a language test. If you've completed your program at a university, you are required to have a language test, Canadian Language Benchmark 7. If you've attended a college, you're required to have a Canadian Language Benchmark 5. But given the fact that the accepted language test is the general one, which you can also use for permanent residents, my advice has always been that when you are writing your language test, whether for postgraduate work permits or for PR, try to have up to a CLB9 so that when that positions you well for your PR program, especially for like points-based programs like the Express Entry. And if you're able to do that and you're using the same language test within 2 years, then you don't need to write another one again. Also, part of the changes from November 1 will be that not all international students will be eligible for postgraduate work permit in Canada, especially for those that will be applying for study permit on or after November 1. Those that are already here, as long as you are attending a designated learning institution that is eligible for postgraduate work permits, you are fine, you complete your program. The only change will likely be the language test if you're applying for the work permit on or after November 1. But for new students coming in, new international students applying for study permits, if you're submitting your study permit application from November 1, then it is advisable to check if the level of study you're coming for will require the field of study requirement. What that means is that for those going to colleges and for those doing programs that are not bachelor's degrees, master's degree, or PhDs in a university, those ones now need the additional field of study requirement before they are eligible for postgraduate work permit. What that means is that IRCC has provided a list of in-demand areas cutting across 5 sectors in Canada: STEM, agric, healthcare, trade, and transport. And if your program is not specifically listed as part of the programs under those sectors, you will not be eligible for a postgraduate work permit. One of the gray area for that IRCC has not clarified for us yet is for those that are doing a second program and doing study permit extension for those programs, will they be affected by that? We don't know yet. We are hoping in the days ahead, IRCC will provide some clarification for that. So just as I've emphasized in the presentation document I have here, if you're going to a university for a bachelor's degree, a master's, or a doctoral degree, you don't need the field of study requirement, even if you're applying for a study permit after November 1. But for those applying and going to colleges doing diplomas, postgraduate diplomas, or going to universities and doing diplomas that are not bachelor's degrees, or going to colleges and doing bachelor's in colleges, those ones would need the field of study requirement. And then lastly on that is that later this year, spousal open work permit for spouses of master students will now be limited to master students that are doing a 16-month program. At the moment right now, even if you're doing a 12-month master's program or 8 months master's program, your spouse is still eligible to apply for a spousal open work permit while you're a student. But this is going to change later this year. We don't know the implementation date for that. Just for like master students here, if your program is not 16 months and you desire to have your spouse with you, it's probably better to apply before the change will start as well. And then for PR changes, just generally, on November 1, the immigration minister will table the multi-year immigration levels plan, which shows us the quota of new permanent residents that Canada plans to welcome over the next 3 years. From everything we've been hearing, right now it's about 500,000 every year for the next 3 years. But there are strong indications that, we're expecting a reduction of that quota, which would make the process of applying for PR even much more competitive for a lot of people. And then for the very first time, we are also going to get a quota for the number of temporary residents that Canada will welcome in the next 3 years. Also, we've seen that IRCC is doing more domestic draws right now for provincial nominee program applicants. They did one today, and also for Canadian Experience Class candidates, which means if you qualify for PR under programs like the Federal Skilled Worker, using work experience from outside Canada, it's much more competitive, and the cutoff for those ones are high right now. And also, we're seeing that they're focusing more on 5 key sectors that are of importance to the economy as identified through the new category-based rounds of invitations that they started last year. So we are urging people who are able to find work experience in those sectors to prioritize those ones, because you only need to have 6 months of experience in those areas. You can add it to previous work experience you have in other sectors, and you will be qualified to apply for PR under those sectors. Those sectors, again, are healthcare, occupation, STEM, trade, transport, agric, and those that can also learn a second language in French as well. I think that should be the end of my presentation, and then we can take some questions as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that well put together presentation. A couple of people already asked questions in here, but we have questions on Slido. I believe based off what you went over, I want to believe that the first question was addressed, but I'm just going to call on Mr. Femi from RCCG Yaya Zone 3 to just confirm if his question was already addressed based off the information on the presentation.
Yeah, so I would say a bit. Thank you once again to the organizers. Thank you to our speaker. But speaker, what I really wanted to understand from you was, for students in Canada, how do you ensure you are not working more than you're required to? I understand what you said about the 24 hours and 28 hours, but sometimes these things get lost in transition. And I'm just trying to understand at this point, what's the definite information you think we can pass down to our youth to say this is the correct way to go in terms of not overworking?
Thanks so much for that. I think it's just emphasizing to them that right now it's still 20 hours per week, not 30 hours this week, 10 hours next week. You understand? So it's 20 hours per week. They can communicate that to their employers and let them know that until IRCC makes the announcement to say it's now 24 hours per week, it's just 20 hours per week. That's what the law allows them to do right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering that. The second question that we had in-house was in regards to express entry routes from Nigeria. So I believe it was Sister Joy. She wanted to know if it was in regards to proof of funds, if it was possible to send the proof of funds to the person in Nigeria for them to go right ahead and embark on the process for express entry. I want to make sure that I got that question right. Sister Joy, are you online if you want to buttress that question first?
Hi, yes. I think thank you again for the presentation. I think one thing that was highlighted to me was the fact that you mentioned how Canadian government is now focusing on healthcare occupations as well.
Right.
But I think the issue with the person I'm trying to apply for is more of the proof of funds. And because of the way Naira is devaluing, it's kind of difficult to send money and then make it remain the same value for 6 months for them to do the proof of funds. So I'm wondering, like, is it possible to sponsor? Because I was thinking of the sponsorship route, but then she's over 22, I think, which is the dependent route. Also in terms of like, how can I do maybe a gift certificate and say, okay, I'm a sister or whatever, I can sponsor her, stuff like that. So I'm trying to figure out a way the best option for proof of funds in this scenario, where she does have the medical experience that she needs, but the problem is the proof of funds part of it.
Awesome. I think I get you. And the person is a sibling, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if a person is a sibling, one, for proof of fund, the money has to be in the name of the applicant or in an account in their own name. So you can't simply say, I have the money, I want to sponsor them. However, what you can do is you can do a gift deed for them. So for permanent residence applications, it's not like study permits that they must have kept the money for like 6 months and all that. Even if it's just a couple of weeks before they submit, they can get gift deed from families and friends. We usually advise that it's close relatives, so like a sibling, that is fine, but you will be releasing the money to them and doing that gift deed, notarizing it, stating that it's not borrowed fund. You've released it. They have access to the money, it's genuine, all that. In terms of like the exchange rate, if they are able to open a dollar account, a domiciliary account, and convert the money you're sending to them to dollar, that's the best way to preserve that, because the exchange rate is not predictable. You don't know what's going to be like by the time they're applying. If they're not doing that, then they're having the naira in excess. Then that would also still be at risk, because you don't know what the exchange rate would be. But let's say, for instance, they need like 10 million naira equivalent right now, and then they have like 20 million. Then we can say maybe by the time they're applying, things will not get that worst. But the best way is just to, like, if they can open a dollar account and convert the money to dollar and keep it in dollar in their accounts.
And it doesn't matter how long the money has been with them, because if I just send it a few weeks before they apply, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. As long as they have the gifted showing that, they will still print their 6-month statement, but the money would apply in their account like a lump sum. But for express entry applications, PR applications, lump sum is not a concern, as long as you have that document backing up the fact that it was gifted from a sibling or a relative, and this is the gifted document they've done to show that it's not borrowed money, they've gifted you the money as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for addressing that concern. I do believe Precious had a concern about other options. She's aware of provisional nominee and the Canadian Express entry, but she also wanted to confirm if there are other options that she could actually go with. Precious, if you don't mind coming off mute, just to ensure that your question is properly portrayed to our guest speaker.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Olu of Canada again. My question was just in regards to the cutoff points right now, right? They're really high. I was saying back in the day, you'd finish school and you're on work permit and you just work for 1 year, and you'll be able to get an invitation, right? But right now the scores are so high that you're seeing a lot of people on work permits, like at the 3-year mark, you're not even able to qualify, even with good IELTS. A lot of times age is a factor, like even people in their early 30s, right? So I'm just wondering other options that people could take advantage of. I know there are nomination programs. That seems to be a long process a lot of times, and a very long process in time for some of those nomination programs through different provinces. But I'm just wondering what other options or routes people could follow.
That's a very good question, and it's a big concern for a lot of people right now, especially those doing 1-year programs and getting 1-year postgraduate work permit. The way I like to put it for people is that it's a race against time. So whether 1-year work permit, whether even 3-year right now, with the competition and the anticipation that the quota for PR would likely even reduce more from November 1, part of the things we've been encouraging people is to be strategic about like the options, their employment options, either before or after completing their program. The work experience you get when you are still an international student does not count for most of those programs. But if you have an employer you're already working with, that they can give you a job offer that meets the requirement of other programs. Like depending on the province you had, there are some provinces that have like employment-based provincial nominee programs. If you're in Ontario, for instance, they have things like the International Student Stream of the OIMP, which is an employer program, has some specific requirements of the type of job offer you need, full-time permanent in tier 0, 1, 2, or 3, and things like that. They have something like that in Alberta that they just started last month using the expression of interest portal that they just started as well. If you have the opportunity of like getting a job offer in Alberta, and you even get that job offer outside of like Calgary and Edmonton, you get more points because it's a point-based program. They have something similar to that in Saskatchewan through their own student stream that also requires your employer to get an SIMP approval letter and things like that. In addition to that is also the category-based selection of the express entry. Even though the general express entry is still there, the Canadian experience class is still there. The cutoff for those ones are in the 500s right now. But if you're able, just like I mentioned earlier, get just 6 months of work experience in an eligible occupation in one of those 5 other sectors, you add it to your work experience, you're good to go. And what we've seen is that the cutoff they are using for those category-based selection is quite low. Sometimes for healthcare, they've gone as low as 300 and something. For Greek, you see like 400 and something. So prioritizing those things, because part of the questions a lot of people will ask us is that, so does that mean that if I get work experience or get PR through those programs or through those categories, do I need to remain in those categories? The answer is no. So it's a work experience-based program. All you have to be able to show is that you've worked in that eligible occupation for 6 months within the last 3 years. You don't need an employer support other than the reference letter you are getting from the employer. You don't need to remain with that employer even as of the time you're applying for the PR. So if it's something you can prioritize, you have the opportunity, maybe you're already working with an employer in that sector, even as a student, and then you complete, you do your 6 months, you add it to your profile, you can go and work in other sectors and still use that to qualify for your PR. And then there are also other employment-based programs, depending on the part of the country you are, especially if you're in Atlantic Canada, for instance, there's the Atlantic immigration program, which started as a pilot, is now a permanent program. It also requires you to get certain types of employment with certain designated employers. So if you're in, let's say, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, we've seen a lot of students that have been able to use that to also get PR as well. So the key is knowing your options well ahead of time, even before you complete your program. There are even some people that have those work experience in the sectors I mentioned before they came to Canada. You don't necessarily need to wait if you belong to that sector to complete your program before you apply for PR. We've seen instances of people like that in our community. Maybe they've worked in the healthcare sector in an eligible occupation, and they are able to use that to apply for PR even before completing their program as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having that addressed. I hope that does confirm your concerns or address your concerns on the
Yes,
question.
thank you very much.
Thank you for the feedback. We're just going to go over to the Slido questions. We do appreciate your input so far. The first question we have here says, how else can I increase my points on my profile? I'm somewhere between 500 and 510. My CELPIP score is quite high. I've also included foreign experience.
And I'm guessing the person is currently under the CEC category. I'm guessing. So if that is the case, which means you already have at least 1 year of work experience in Canada, except you look at other things like maybe if you get a job offer. If you get a job offer supported by LMIA, you are working with an employer that can get you LMIA, that will give you between 50 to 200 points. depending on the tier of the job. So tier 1, 2, and 3 will give you 50 points. Tier 0 will give you, I think, about 200 points. You can look at that. If you've also not maxed out the work experience in Canada, so let's say currently maybe you are just under the FSW, which is just foreign work experience, and you're working in a tier 0, 1, 2, or 3 job in Canada, by the time you have 1 year of work experience in Canada, you also get up to, I think, 35 to 40 points, depending on your age. That's another one. Another one that a lot of people have been considering right now, it's under those category experience. If you're able to get 6 months of work experience in any of those categories I mentioned earlier, added to your profile, that qualifies you under those categories. And the big one, some people are making the dedication to learn French as a second language. For the second language in French, you don't need to pass it as high as the first language, but you must get up to a Canadian language benchmark 7, CLB 7, in TCF or TEF. If you add that to your profile, it will increase your score slightly, but it will also position you for the French category. You understand? And the cutoff they've been using for the French category is the lowest so far. We've seen like 340, 360 and things like that. And they do more draws under the French category because part of the consideration right now is to increase the population of French-speaking nationals in Canada in other provinces outside of Quebec. So you can look at some of these options and see the ones you can do in both the immediate and the longer term as well.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. I also just wanted to say, if we do have time, just in case like a question, you still have a follow-up question, feel free to also post that or raise your hands and we would do our best to address those. But just to go over to the next question, it says for visitors that have SOWP and their spouses are done with study and have PGWP, does the new policy affect them as well?
The straightforward answer to that is no. So if your spouse already, if you're currently on an SOWP and your spouse has a postgraduate work permit, maybe you now want to use them to extend the spouse open work permit, you are not affected. You still can apply for that extension. However, there's one key thing I would add to that quickly that we're seeing popularly in our community right now is that a lot of people do not know that for that student that is now on a PGWP to apply for extension of spousal open work permit for you, they must already have a job offer. So they must have a job they're doing in Canada, and then they must also support that with 3 pay slips, three of their most recent pay slips from that job as well. So a lot of people will graduate, they are here with their family, their spouse is on a spousal open work permit, and then once they're applying for postgraduate work permits, without having a job offer, they will also apply for the spousal open work permit. IRCC will approve the postgraduate work permit and then refuse the SOWP extension. And then when they come back, we look at things and it's like, oh yeah, you don't have a job offer, so you can't extend for your spouse yet. So just take note of that when you're doing the SOWP extension. But other than that, every other thing is still the same for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do see that Fumi's hand is raised. You can come off mute to ask a question or make a contribution to the last response our speaker had.
Thank you very much. Mine is a question. I just want to find out. Ask my question from Nigeria. What are the different routes to come in, and how easy it is with age and coming with a child or so? What are the different routes and with immigration law? I just want to be educated on some things like that.
Okay, so generally in Canada, there are more than 100 immigration pathways, different requirements, different processes. We can spend the next 3 days talking about all those things. But the way I like to categorize this is that if you want to come to Canada, there are 2 large umbrellas. You're either coming as a permanent resident or you're coming as a temporary resident. So under the temporary residency category will be things like you're coming here to study as an international student. Right now, Depending on the level of program you're coming for, you can still come with your family members directly as a student. If you're coming for a master's or PhD and things like that, if the children are less than at 22 or below, they can also still get a dependent study permit with you. Depending on the level of program, if you have a spouse, let's say for a master's degree, for instance, your spouse can still come with you on a spousal open work permit. The second option under temporary residency is to come directly on a work permit if you get a job offer and an employer to support you with the LMI process. So LMI is Labor Market Impact Assessment. It's a document that employers will get from Canada to hire a foreign national from outside Canada. It's not impossible, but it's not easy to come by because the employer would have to justify to ESDC that they've looked all across Canada. There's no Canadian citizen. There's no Canadian PR. There's no temporary resident that already has a work authorization in Canada to do the job. But that's under the temporary residency umbrella. Under the PR umbrella, we have different programs like the Express Entry. We have the category-based selection of the Express Entry. If you have eligible work experience in the last of at least 6 months full-time within the last 3 years in some of the sectors I mentioned. Those ones are point-based program. You may have lost some points due to age, but the cutoff is also low. If you have good education, good work experience, you do your language test, you pass that very well. You can look at that. There's also the provincial nominee programs in different provinces. In Canada, we have 10 provinces and 3 territories. The way I like to put it is that each of those provinces are like mini countries within the larger country called Canada. So they select people for provincial nominee programs based on what is in demand in their provinces. So if you have things like, you have an in-demand experience or experience in an in-demand occupation in a particular province, those provinces also have different streams of nominee programs. In Ontario, for instance, there are 8 different streams, different requirements, different expectations. You can look at that. If you want to know about the provincial nominee program in any province, put the name of the province and PMP in Google. Let's say Ontario PMP, you will find more details on that. So those ones are available. There are also other employer-specific programs for PR, like the Atlantic Immigration Program I mentioned earlier. They have a stream that is open to foreign workers who also get a job offer with any of those designated employers in New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island as well. If you get that, that could let you use one stone to kill 2 birds. You can use that to apply for work permit and also use it to apply for nomination in the province. And one of those provinces has a program coming up on October 24th, I believe. Newfoundland and Labrador, they're doing a recruitment exercise where they will connect employers with those looking for employment in certain sectors as well. A lot of them do that regularly. New Brunswick does that. As a matter of fact, New Brunswick even travels to different parts of the world to do those international recruitment exercises. So that's an example of something else you can also look at.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I would just like to implore us to post our questions on the Slido. I do see that we had a couple of hands raised before. We just want to make sure that we get you the questions through Slido, and if we do have time, we'll call people in-house to contribute. I would go over the next question. And I believe this person is asking if you could please review the experience-based immigration pilot, and if you could shed more light on that or shed more light on many other PR pathways.
I'm not quite sure what the person means by experience, but maybe the category-based selection using experience in those categories, right? Is the person here, am I right?
If you did post that question, if you don't mind just coming off mute to just confirm that so your question is properly addressed.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Okay.
So what I'm asking, because you were discussing pathways that are in New Brunswick and that are in Alberta. So I just wanted to know like, because you were saying something about experience-based. You were saying like they're work experience-based pathways. They're not like, I don't know if that's what you meant, but that's what I understood by what you were saying. So I just wanted you to shed more light on that path of how to get your PR through those means.
Okay, awesome. What I said was employer-based. So you require a job offer from an employer for those programs. Like in Abada, they award points to you if you have a job offer there, and they award more points to you if you have a job offer outside of Calgary and Edmonton. In New Brunswick, it's the same if you have a job offer. That's why they also prioritize like their international recruitment. And the type of job offer you need for those programs will depend on each province. So in some provinces, let's say like I believe in Saskatchewan, they only require you to, some programs in Saskatchewan require you to have a full-time permanent job offer. Some require you to have just a 1 year or a job offer guaranteed for 1 year. The same thing in Alberta as well, the same thing in New Brunswick. They have like employer-based programs that if you get a job in their province and the job meets the requirements in certain sectors or certain categories of job, then you can use that to facilitate your provincial nominee program, which eventually will lead to permanent residence in Canada as well.
Awesome. I take it that that was addressed. Thank you so much for coming off mute to shed more light on the question. We do have a follow-up question in regards to the previous, I think it was the previous question you had addressed. It says, just a follow-up on the last question, must the spouse with SOWP have a job offer to apply for extension of SOWP?
Okay, no, the SOWP holder does not need a job offer, but the postgraduate work permit holder, which is the student that has graduated and is now on a PGWP, needs a job offer for the extension of SOWP to happen. But the SOWP holder does not need a job offer.
Okay. Thank you so much. This next question, I believe you may have addressed it, but I'm guessing it's someone else that wants to know this. It says, what are the best options for proof of funds for someone in Nigeria trying to do express entry? Would a gift certificate work if a sibling in Canada gives the money?
The direct answer is yes. So just like I explained earlier, that's one of the best options. It could be a gift deed from a sibling or a close relative. They notarize the gifted document. You have the evidence that they transferred the money to you as well.
Awesome. The next question says, what is the best route or plan for a person with an ND software engineer with more than 3 years experience, 1 year college in Canada, good English school?
Okay, so software engineers are part of the STEM categories of the category-based selection. You can look at that. 3 years is very, very good. If you also make that software engineer your primary occupation in your express entry profile, there are some provinces who go directly into the express entry pool to scout for people. When they go there, they typically scout for people in 3 sectors: healthcare, STEM, and trade. So your software engineering experience will also qualify for that. An example is Ontario. Ontario goes to the express entry pool to scout for people. So even if your cutoff does not meet the federal STEM, you may be, lucky to have a province go into the pool to scout for you. And Ontario would typically pick people with lower scores than what the federal has used for a draw in that category as well. So that's another one to look at. If you're also able to like get a job offer in that space in places like Ontario, British Columbia, and Alberta, Alberta also has the accelerated tech pathway for those who are already in express entry pool. They are in the tech profession, which software engineer will be one of those, and they have a job offer in their province as well. And then you see something like the BC Tech PMP also in British Columbia. You also see the OIMP STEM pathway in Ontario as well. But those 3 would require you to have a job offer in one of those provinces to be eligible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. The next question says, how long do you have to work in a trade before you can apply for PR? I feel like I know the answer to this, but
Give it a shot.
I think you mentioned 6 months. I think that's what you said. Okay.
That's absolutely right. So the additional thing I would emphasize is to go and look for the precise occupations that are listed under each of those categories. In the trade sector, for instance, I believe strongly 10 occupations are listed. In healthcare, 35 occupations. In STEM, 24 occupations, if I remember. In agri, 3 occupations. So depending on the kind of trade you're doing, you only need to have 6-month experience in that trade added to your profile to be eligible under the trade category of express entry. The additional thing to add to that is now that if you don't have any previous work experience before, then you would have to work up to 1 year. Why that is so is that for you to even open an express entry profile, you need at least 1 year experience to be your primary NOC. So if you don't have any previous, if you have like 1-2 years experience from outside Canada, those ones will be your primary NOC. You just add 6 months of the category experience to your profile and you're good to go. But if you have 0 work experience before, then you need 1 year to add to your profile to be eligible under the category selection.
Awesome. So the next question says, is it okay to do cash jobs? So far, your C number is not used because lots of people do cash jobs to meet up since the 20 hours is not enough.
That's a very good question. Legally and officially, no. Legally and officially, no, because you're working unauthorized. And that's very, very interesting because earlier today, I came across some information on CBSA now ramping up things with identifying people working unauthorized in Canada and issuing them removal orders. So if you follow me on social media, we're going to be posting that this week so that you can see the evidence of that. It has happened in Alberta, it has happened in Nova Scotia, and I believe British Columbia or something. Can't remember the third province right now, but that's something we've never seen before in Canada. It's popular in UK with the Home Office. It's popular in US with ICE, going to companies and identifying people working unauthorized and all that. But we have strong, verifiable information that CBSA is now doing that in Canada as well. So officially, legally, you are not allowed to work unauthorized in Canada or work more than the law permits you to work as an international student.
So thank you for speaking on that. I would go over to the next question. It says, any hope for parents or grandparents PR? It's been stopped for years, and are there other routes for your parents to get permanent residency?
That's a very good question. I think a couple of weeks ago, we made an update on, I believe, 12 updates we are expecting from IRCC, and this program is one of those programs. This is the Parents and Grandparents Program that allows permanent residents and citizens to sponsor their parents for permanent residency in Canada. The last time they opened the pool for that was in 2020. Last year, they still selected from that pool. We don't know when next they are going to open that expression of interest pool for the PGP program right now. Are there other pathways for permanent residency, except they're applying directly through all the other routes that are available to everyone? But I know maybe because of age and things like that, they probably would not be eligible. For right now, it's just the parents and grandparents sponsorship program. Hopefully, IRCC will look in that direction and open that pretty soon. But fingers crossed to see what happens in the days and weeks and months ahead.
Man, fingers crossed indeed. I know that Sam, I do see your hands up. I understand you have a follow-up question for a question you had posted. You can just come off mute and
Okay, so you initially mentioned that depending on the pathway you're using to get your PR, you can work up to 6 months as long as you have prior experience. Because I know that the first question is, I know that with PR, when you're reading like the eligibility and requirements, most times they'll say that you should have like a full-time work, permanent, and all of those things. And they always say that as a student, your all the times you were working, like for instance, if you're a care support worker, if you have been working as a care support worker as a student, all those years do not count towards your PR. How does the 6 months and a prior experience that you had as a student, to clarify my question, is it true or is it false? Does my
I
experience
get what you're
count?
saying. So the prior experience I was talking about are experience you had before you came to Canada as a student. So
Oh,
you
okay.
work from back home, you have previous work experience that you can use to create your profile. For emphasis sake, as an international student in Canada, all the work you're doing while still on a study permit, that does not count as Canadian experience for programs like the Express Entry program. Your Canadian experience starts counting from the time you've applied for postgraduate work permits. Emphasis on applied. A lot of people did not know this. Let's say you complete your program in August, you applied for postgraduate work permits in September, you started working, your Canadian work experience was started, even though they've not issued your postgraduate work permit. So if you now work, the 6 months, again, is now specifically for the category-based selection of Express Entry. You have an eligible work experience of 6 months in trade, transport, agric, healthcare, and STEM. You add that eligible 6-month experience, full-time, an average of 30 hours per week, to your previous work experience from outside Canada. So for emphasis sake, not the student experience you did while in Canada, but some people, they've worked like 2-3 years before coming here to study. They can use that to create their profile and then now add the 6 months in the category to become eligible for the category-based selection. I hope I answered that clearly.
Yes, you did. One last one. Very
Okay.
last. Okay.
I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you off, but I know we
Okay.
have about 10 minutes and I want to make sure that we get through answering a lot of other people's questions as well. If you don't
Okay.
mind, just taking about 2 or 3 more and then, or just post it in the Slido so that way it just comes up.
Okay. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No worries. So for the next question, it says I have 3 years PGWP last year September. Now that SOWP has been cancelled at the point of entry, how can I go about it by applying for him?
If he's outside Canada, you can apply for SOWP for him, even from outside Canada. All you need, again, is as a PGWP holder, you have the job offer, you can show evidence of your last 3 pay slip. You can apply for that SOWP even from outside Canada.
Okay, awesome. The next person would like to know if there's a different way to apply for PGWP extension aside from applying by paper.
Awesome. And I'm getting you are doing PGWP extension because you did not get the full length you were originally eligible for. That's the only condition that makes you eligible to apply for PGWP. Let's say you were meant to get 3-year postgraduate work permit, but your passport only had like 1 year left when you applied, so they gave you 1 year and they said you can extend. IRCC recommends that your PGWP extension should be done by paper. If you go on IRCC website, that's what is categorically stated there. But we've also seen instances where people do that PGWP extension online, applying online, just like they did the first one they did, and attaching a letter of explanation to the client's information section, stating why they are applying for the extension online. Maybe it's required by the employer, and also emphasizing what makes them eligible for that extension as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. The next question says, For an 18-year-old that wants to come to Canada to study practical nursing or personal support worker, I wish to know how feasible it is for her. Is proof of funds needed?
Absolutely, yes. So any international student coming to study, whether it's nursing, whether it's personal support, whether it's any other area, you need to show that, one, you have enough money to defray the cost of studying in Canada without having to work. Two, the cost would include your cost of tuition and living expenses, and other additional expenses in at least the first year. So right now, the living expenses has been pegged at 20,635 Canadian dollars for 1 year. You add that to whatever the tuition in the first year is, plus additional expenses to cover cost of like transportation, arrival cost, and things like that. So if they have that, 18-year-old, it's not a concern. They can apply. They are able to show that they have enough money, they get the admission to support themselves. It's quite possible to come and study in Canada as an 18-year-old.
Thank you so much for addressing that. I want to believe this follow-up question is for that same person because it says,
Okay.
what can I do to enhance her visa approval?
So again, the fund is part of that. The two other things that the Immigration Refugee Protection Act requires you to be able to show is that, number one, they have a genuine purpose for coming to Canada. What's the purpose? What's the program? Are they able to articulate the need to study that program and to study that program in Canada? What are the employment prospects for that program outside Canada? Because as an international student, the default expectation is that you're coming to Canada to study and you will be going back home after your study, even though you will be eligible or you may be eligible for postgraduate work permit and things like that. The second thing is showing the stronger ties you have outside Canada. So home ties, parents, investment, assets, and all those other things will be the second thing they will look at. And then the proof of fund, just like I explained earlier. So those are the three key things that these officers will look out for when you are applying for a study permit. So ensuring that you have well-supported or supportive documents in those three areas will be the way to enhance the visa approval.
Thank you so much for addressing the follow-up question. The next question says, what PR pathways exist for creative professionals, considering non-traditional work arrangements may not be eligible?
That's a good question. So for a program like Express Entry, even if you are self-employed, you can still apply for Express Entry. They just require you to show the evidence of your self-employment, providing information and documents such as your business registration, getting reference letter from previous clients, from industry leaders and things like that. But you don't necessarily have to be a 9-to-5 person before you can apply for permanent residence using Express Entry. In some provinces, you may also be able to use your self-employment to apply for provincial nomination in some provinces, depending on the province and also the type of program you're applying for in those provinces as well. So it's pretty much the same. There are also some special programs. I can't remember the name right now, but I know they have some like special program for like people in certain industries like arts and things like that. I don't have the details offhand right now, but if you look up like the Government of Canada website, cic.gc.ca, there's a place where you can fill certain questions to determine the programs you may be eligible for in Canada. They have that questionnaire there on the website, www.cic.gc.ca. You can also check that out as well. But they have some programs for like some categories of individuals in like I think performing arts and creative arts and things like that as well.
Thank you so much. That was actually an interesting question for me to actually hear, like hearing the response to that question as well. The next question says, what options exist if my PGWP has expired, is expiring soon, and Oh, I'm sorry. I think I skipped the question. Actually, it says, are you familiar with new postgraduate work permit extension policy allowing international graduates to obtain an open work permit?
Okay, that's a good question. So the new postgraduate work permit extension is dependent on the particular province. Right now, only I believe 2 provinces and 1 territory have signed the agreement with IRCC, Manitoba and Alberta, and I can't remember if it's one of those territories, Nunavut or something like that, have signed an agreement with IRCC to offer postgraduate work permit extension to people that are applying for nomination in their province. In Alberta, not everyone in Alberta will be able to apply. Alberta is limiting it to making that selection themselves. But in all those provinces, it's typically people that have applied for provincial nomination in their province and they've gone through the preliminary assessment stage, which means they're just waiting for like final approval of their provincial nominee program. Other than that, if you're applying for an employment-based nomination in a province like Ontario, so your program that you're applying for requires you to get a full-time permanent job offer in Ontario. When you get your nomination, Ontario may also give you a work permit support letter that would allow you to use your provincial nomination and the work permit support letter to apply for a work permit extension. Other than that, the general postgraduate work permit extension, the 18-month policy they've done twice in the past, the minister has announced that that is not coming anymore. So if your work permit is expiring very, very soon, one thing I would urge you to avoid by all means is avoid going out of status in Canada. Your work permit is expiring, you are not eligible for those special extension, or you are not in one of those provinces, you're not eligible for express entry and the likes, you can apply for a visitor's record to maintain legal status in Canada. A visitor's record allows you to maintain legal status in Canada while you still continue to pursue all those PR applications. That's one. 2, if you now are able to apply for a full PR application before your work permit will expire, whether it's express entry, whether you've gotten a nomination, you've submitted your full PR application, emphasis on full PR application. So it's not just that I'm in the express entry pool. You've gotten an ITA you've submitted. Before your work permit expires, you can use the acknowledgement of receipt for the PR application you've made to apply for a bridging open work permit. So even if it's just a couple of days before your postgraduate work permit will expire, you've submitted a full PR application, you have the acknowledgement of receipt for that, you can use that to also apply for a bridging open work permit. So those are some of the options to explore.
Sorry, can you, the last thing that you just said about, if the work permit is about to expire and they apply for their PR. So you don't mean creating the profile, you mean
Not creating a profile. You've gotten an invitation, they've invited you, you've submitted a full PR application, and you have the acknowledgement of receipt that you've submitted a PR application to IRCC. You have that acknowledgement of receipt, your work permit has not expired, even if it's just a couple of days left, you can use that to apply for a bridging open work permit.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. The next question says, what options exist? I think that's what I just read. What options exist if my PGWP has expired, is expiring soon, I haven't met the express entry work requirements?
I think that's just related to some of the things I mentioned. If it's expiring, you're not meeting the necessary requirement for any PR program, you can do a visitor's record to remain in legal status in Canada. Make sure you apply for that before the work permit will expire. You can also, for some people, if you're working with an employer that is willing to support you, that's the one I forgot earlier, they can get LMIA for you to move you to a closed work permit. So it's going to be an employer-specific work permit. You can continue to work on that, and the work you're doing on that also counts as Canadian experience.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. The next person says, I keep getting ineligible when I try to open an express entry profile, even with over 10 years experience in banking outside Canada.
Yes, so that's possible because there are 6 factors that are used in determining your eligibility for express entry when you try to create your profile. So it's not just your work experience. 1 is age, 2 is your language test result, 3 is your work experience, 4 is your level of education, 5 is your adaptability factor, things like, do you have family members in Canada? Have you studied in Canada? Where do you have them? 6 is your job offer factor. On all of those 6 factors, you must score 67 over 100 eligibility points. If your language test is too low or not eligible, your language test must be a minimum of CLB7. In IRCC, for instance, CLB7 is having 6,666 in reading, speaking, writing, listening. So if you have 999 and you have 5.5 in 1, that is an ineligible language test. You understand? Also, based on your own other factors, on those 6 selection factors, many people will need more than the minimum CLB7 to get into the pool. So even if you have just CLB7 and your other factors are not as high to give you the 67 over 100 eligibility point, then you will not be eligible. Some other popular factors will be things like the proof of fund you're putting in. If it's lower than the current threshold, your work experience, if it's in an ineligible tier, so your work experience must be in tier 0, 1, 2, or 3. You understand? I'm going to give you an example that a lot of people don't know. Banking experience, if you are working in a bank as a teller person and something like that, like all those teller and cashier and all that in the bank, it's a tier 4 job in Canada. It is not eligible for express entry. So look at those things, look at the NOC, look at the proof of fund threshold, calculate your 6 selection factors, and find what is making you ineligible to get into the pool.
Thank you. The next person says, if, for instance, I work 12 hours this week, can I make up for the 8 hours deficit in the next week alongside?
And work 28 hours? The answer is no. So it's counted weekly, 20 hours each week. It's not cumulatively, and it's not carried over. So it's 20 hours per week.
Awesome. The next person says, and thank you for addressing that. The next person says, if a job doesn't require my SIN contract role, will there be a proper trail of how many hours for this particular employment as I have to file my taxes?
IRCC, CRA, CBSA, they know how to do their background check and find out even information that we may not be able to think of how they can find out. My best advice for you would always comply with the provisions of the law, the requirements, and the limits placed on your category of visa by the immigration department. I can't say that they have a way or they don't have a way, but I can tell you categorically that all those agencies work together and they know how to find things out. It may be from the employer side, you don't even know the extent they can go to as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. The next person says, as a student that is on break for 4 months and has a full-time job for that time before going back to school again, does this count by any means for Canada experience?
No, it doesn't, because you are still on a study permit. So that is a scheduled break in school that you're allowed to work full-time, but it also does not count as the Canadian experience for programs like Express Entry and the like.
Awesome. The next person says, can I apply for open work permit for my husband and kids? If I get my 3 years postgraduate work permit, what do I
Yes.
need?
Yes. So once, if you are a student right now that the program is not eligible to apply for a spousal open work permit while you're a student, once you cross to the PGWP, you have a job offer, like I mentioned earlier, you have your 3-pay slip, you can apply for open work permit for your spouse and study permits or visitor's record for your children as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do see someone's hand up. If you please don't mind just posting your question on Slido, we would appreciate it. We just want to get through most of the questions as quickly as possible. This person says, as a current student in master's program that is eligible for postgraduate work permit, what are the requirements for SWOP? What is also the proof of fund required?
Okay, so when you're applying for spousal open work permit for your spouse, it's still the same requirements as if you are a student. So things like the proof of marriage, the job offer, like I mentioned for you, your last 3-pay slip, the evidence of your own status in Canada, proof of fund, there's no stipulated amount of money, but you can use like the low income threshold, LICO, to look at how much do I need based on my family number. So if it's just 2 of you, you have that LICO threshold. You can just say LICO threshold, you see like the amount of money per the number of family members and being able to show that you have that fund ready. Other requirements, of course, the application form, medical test for them, their passports, their evidence of their home ties if they are still outside Canada, and things like that. Oh, the person mentioned they are a master's student, so you don't need a job offer as a master's student. You don't need a job offer, but apply right now. Keep in mind the change that I mentioned will be coming. If your program is not up to 16 months, we are expecting some change to that in the future. But it's just also evidence of your own studentship in Canada. You're enrolled in school, the provisions you've made for medical tests for your family member, and things like that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for posting all your questions on Slido. I'm just going to take this last question.
Okay.
It says, what advice would you give someone who is having issues evaluating their BSc credentials and is thinking of getting in the pool without it? So do they have a shot at getting nominated? PS, they have 2 postgraduate degrees in Canada.
So except you are not getting points for that program, you are not able to evaluate, you can't claim points for a foreign credential that you've not evaluated. So if you're having challenges with that, you can get into the pool with the Canadian own alone, or if you add that foreign one, you are indicating that you've not evaluated it, so you are not getting points for it. But there's no other way. If you want to get points for a foreign credential, you have to evaluate it and get a report from the organization you're using showing that it has been evaluated.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
There's a question I saw that I checked the answer for that I think I want to answer quickly. The person is asking if a bus driver is an eligible NOC. I think there's a question like that. I don't know if you can read that out, if you still have it, but I think it's something like that.
Let me see if I can quickly access it. Sorry. Okay, so bus. What is the tier for a school bus driver in a transportation company? Is it also eligible for PR, or does it count for a Canadian experience also?
I believe so strongly. So I saw the NOC for a bus driver is NOC 73301. It's a tier 3 job. You can just do a Google search of that NOC to see if the main duties align with what you do in your own position. So check NOC 73301. I think that should be the closest to that. It says bus driver specifically. If the duties align with what you do in your position, then it's a tier 3 job and it's eligible.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for being here and for addressing all of the immigration concerns. I'm just going to pass it to Brad Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olu of Canada. Thank you. Really appreciate your time. I mean, you went in depth. Thank you so very much, sir. Please, I mean, those on the line, please follow him at Olufemi Loye. That's Olu of Canada. I mean, I sought his name out on IG and I found it. So very, very easy. I mean, he has a lot of information. So please, I see the questions coming in. I will see if we can have him back. Hopefully, he's able to assist us again. But please, I mean, as I said when he started, he actually posts a lot of information on his IG page. So follow him; you get all the information you need. And I think Sister Daya has posted the link on the chat. So please follow that. The reason why I had to stop us is because the prayer team, they've been bugging me. I need to leave this line because they're meant to come in soon. So please do bear with us. Your question that I see on Slido, we'll see if we can get Olu of Canada to answer them for us and then get you guys the answers, or maybe we'll have another session. We'll discuss that. Well, thank you so very much, sir. We really appreciate it. I mean, you actually have a wealth of knowledge. I mean, you have a lot of information, so we really do appreciate you for taking this time. So please, once again, as I said, follow him on IG, and you can DM him, and I'm sure he's going to answer you if you have other questions. We'll have to wrap up because we need to be off this line. And I hope you had a wonderful session today, and we'll do more of this, not just topics relating to Bible and things like that. So because we'll try to impact the community. I see people saying that they want to get access to this recording. So follow or subscribe to us, subscribe to our channel at RCCG Yaya Khan, CAN, RCCG Yaya CAN on YouTube. And you'll get this will be posted on there. So if you subscribe to us, if you don't, you can have you have access to it. Anyways, it's 9:04. Let us round up with a word of prayer. Let me get Sister Dio the honors to help us with that.
Heavenly Father, we say thank you. We give you all the glory and all the honor. We thank you for the vessel that you used today to bestow knowledge upon us. We ask that you intervene in any situation that he might be going through and continue to use him as a channel of blessings to many others in the mighty name of Jesus.
Amen.
We pray for every person who might be going through one situation or another regarding the topic we discussed today. We pray you shall intervene and let your glory shine forth in their path in the mighty name of Jesus.
Amen.
We thank you, Heavenly Father, for this time. May your name forever be glorified. For in Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. I meant to give some announcement, but don't worry, follow us on IG. We'll give you the announcement there. God bless you guys. We're out of time. Thank you so much. I love Canada.
Thank you
God
for
bless.
having me.
Thank you so much, Olu.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.